All too often, we hear the phrase look in the mirror, right? But the fact is that most people have a really hard time doing that. Not only because they don't want to see, but because they really don't know what it is that they're looking for. I found through my own experiences and helping hundreds of clients that the best way to actually look in the mirror is to use the people and the relationships around you. Now, many people probably won't like what I'm about to say, but the truth is, you start with what you don't like about people, your judgments about people, your comparisons to others, for better or worse, what makes you angry about people, what triggers you, but also what you admire about people. And the reason for this is that whatever we're seeing in others is actually what's being reflected back to us from our own subconscious beliefs and thoughts about ourselves. Okay. Sometimes we get angry, we get triggered by something we don't like about ourselves on a subconscious level and something we feel that we lack. Same with the things we may admire. We tend to attract what we are or what we want to be, whether we like it or not. I was married to a man who always seemed to have everything go his way, no matter what, no matter how horrible he could be at times. I remember one night he caught a flat tire. He called his friend to vent about the situation, and his friend sends him $200 and tells him, "Don't worry about paying me back." Now, I suspect the reason for this vent in the first place was, to get that money. But anyway, the cost of the tow and tire in total would have been $100. So not only did he get the cost of the tire covered, but he also made money from his mishap. That's great, right? Now, instead of me being happy for him, I found myself being resentful. I was wondering, why is everything always working out for him and not for me? Then there was the time I attempted a career in photography, and he was my first subject. In fact, it was my idea. I thought he would make a wonderful model because, of course, he was beautiful and he knew it. I even told him how to pose and everything. From my terrible quality photos sprang forth his highly successful acting career. Needless to say, my photography career went nowhere and I quickly gave it up. It was years later when I figured out the mirror technique through studying the law of attraction along with my intuition. I came to understand in the middle of a heated argument and throughout our divorce that everything I couldn't stand about him was really what I hated about myself. You see, I had always been insecure. I had always compared myself to others from a young age. I was always ironically drawn to people, friends, and lovers alike who possessed the qualities that I felt that I didn't have. I remember my best friend in middle and high school. Every guy I liked wanted her instead. In my mind, she was just prettier and cooler than me. I blatantly remember feeling both love and envy for her, so much so that I didn't even want her being friends with anyone else. Almost like I wanted to possess her. Again, I had attracted someone who had everything I didn't, but at the time I didn't understand that it was much more internal than external. You see, long before we ever met any of those guys, I already held the belief that she was better than me, more than me somehow. And so this subconscious belief projected outward. And lo and behold, the guys liked her, not me. This was all on a subconscious level, of course. And I didn't realize it then, but it wasn't her looks, it wasn't her personality, but it was her confidence. So, in that argument with my husband, I could see myself for the first time in the mirror of him. And the very same things I loved about him in the beginning, I grew to hate because I was able to live vicariously through him, through what I believed was perfect, until I grew bitter that I didn't believe in myself in the way that he did. You see, he was what a lot of people would label or call a narcissist, but he still got everything he wanted and more. Why? Because he believed he should. He believed that he deserved, entitled. In the beginning, I was always his biggest cheerleader, content to soak up his greatness. And because I had the honor of being his wife, We did everything together. It was almost like we lived the exact same life, like we were the same person sometimes. We even always worked at the same places most of the time. Later, once he began his acting career, I could no longer live vicariously because acting wasn't my forte. I couldn't go with him. I felt left behind. I wondered, why is that I can give him his wings, but I can't fly with him? When he would have great moments of celebration and accomplishment, I would always find a way to downplay it or roll my eyes, either literally or in my mind. I began to see this was my own bit of narcissism because if it wasn't me who had this success and attention, I didn't like it. Yet I still didn't see that it was I who had failed to recognize my own talents and abilities. Once I discovered that my husband was simply a mirror reflection of all my trauma, all my doubts about myself, that's when I began to heal. I also came to discover that the confidence I perceived him to have was only validated by people who felt less than him, including myself. Hence, him being a mirror for me, as I was also his, because he was also very insecure. Although it was easier for me to be angry at the person who triggered me, it made a huge difference in my life to look in the mirror. You see, the first step to healing is first learning awareness. And sometimes it's just simply not that easy to assess those things about yourself to yourself. Although the inner work still has to be done, the first step is that awareness. I once heard on a YouTube channel that self awareness is a superpower, and it is. Because if you change yourself, you change your world. The easiest way to do this, in my opinion, is by looking in the mirror of the people you love or hate and start to ask yourself, what is it I love about them? What is it I hate about them? And why? What does that say about me? I once did a YouTube video series on my tarot channel. Now, normally I do love readings, career readings, money readings, future readings, all that stuff that, people want to see and hear. But this one time, I got inspired to do a series called A Look in the Mirror for each of the zodiac signs. I basically asked the cards, what does this sign judge about others and what does it say about them? I was very, very proud of this series, and surprisingly, all the readings align very much so with the characteristics of all the signs. But just to be clear, not every sign is going to be like another, but I digress. This series did not get nearly as many views as the love, the career, and the future readings, which became is no surprise. As I said, people don't like to look in the mirror. I had been using this mirror technique for years on my clients, and it always worked, most of the time for those who actually applied and took my advice. I would watch these people grow and thrive and change as I became a mirror for them to see themselves in, who they truly were, their wounds, their gifts, their talents, abilities. And just like with my husband and his acting career, I was always wondering, why can I give people their wings, but I can never leave the ground? You see, I was always good at advising and telling others how to improve their lives. But for whatever reason, I could not take my own advice. And it would frustrate me and embitter me to watch people grow, flourish, and thrive from the help and advice that I had given them while I remained where I was. During my separation, my husband would consistently still text me and call me and express his love for me, specifically when he thought I was getting over him. This would make me angry because it was my decision in the marriage. And how can I move on if you're still pulling on me? You see, I put the responsibility in his hands for me to be okay. When I asked him to please stop so I could have an easier time getting on with my life. When he would do as I asked and begin going out and hanging out late while still living in the same home with me, I would call his phone, send crazy text messages, and flip out when he would finally come in at 3 or 4 a.m. It was then that I realized it wasn't him keeping me holding on to this codependent relationship. It was me. He wasn't keeping me stuck. I was. Pay attention to the blame that you place on others. That's one of the biggest ways to gain that self-awareness, which with awareness comes accountability. With accountability comes great power because once you admit your part, you embrace the power you had to create a situation in the first place. And thereby you gain the power to create intentionally and create better. So although my husband may have been holding on to me by continuing to express his love and be manipulative, I was also holding on by expressing my insecurity and fear of him moving on. Because if he moved on, then that meant I wasn't worthy. Because being his wife was my entire identity. That's what gave me any ounce of confidence that I may have had. After that, I began working on myself, on my image, on my self love. And it wasn't easy, but I had taken that first step to self awareness. When we look in the mirror, we're not only looking for those flaws, those wounds and insecurities, but once we do discover them and accept them, we're able to overcome them. And then we're able to see other things as well. When I was finally able to see my true reflection and heal, I was also able to see my gifts, talents, and abilities. And that, people, is how I got my wings.